Thank you all for joining our final workshop in our e-commerce essentials series that helps you utilize digital tools to maximize your business potential. Today's workshop will take a deeper dive into cybersecurity to help you protect your key data. If you have any questions today, please type them in the chat and Earl will relay them to Jacob after their presentation. And now I'm thrilled to introduce you all to Jacob Blackston of the Delaware SBDC and Earl Gregorich of the Greenville area SBDC in South Carolina. Both Jacob and Earl are leaders and founding members of the America's SBDC Northstar Cybersecurity program.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction.
Thank you, Jacob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jake Blackston, and Earl is out here. Earl, you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody from
There's Earl.
sunny South Carolina.
So, welcome to the e-commerce and data protection. We learned that a lot of small businesses during the pandemic needed to go online in order to survive. And then when doing so, that led to a lot more online cybersecurity issues arise for small businesses than ever before, mainly because now all of your systems are interconnected and everything is through some type of software. So throughout this presentation, we are going to go through different privacy and data protection laws that you might need to be aware of or might need to understand if you're doing business with anyone within the states of the United States or outside of the United States. We're also going to cover the outlook of the digital economy, current trends that we're seeing in the e-commerce space as it pertains to cybersecurity, and then what best practices you as a small business can do in order to make sure that your online store or your website or whatever it is that you're utilizing for an online platform is secure and as safe as possible. So for starters, I like to go over what is data protection and privacy. And basically, it's the measures and principles to implement to safeguard your personal and sensitive information. And sensitive and personal information is your customer data, your email addresses, their first, last name. If you store social security numbers, credit card information, any of that is considered PII, personal identifiable information, and is considered sensitive information when collected. Now, every state is slightly different on what they deem as a data breach and data specific, and what, like if you were hacked or whatever it is and data was taken. Every state has a very unique data law that pertains to if it was just birth dates, you might not have to do something. But if it is first and last name, email address, and social security, you do, or any combination of that. So every state is slightly different. Here in Delaware, we have the data privacy law. It's called House Bill 180. I know South Carolina, Michigan, and all the other states that we've done this in all have their own variations of it. But just keep in mind that when you are collecting data or you're thinking about collecting data, that you do have some state and actual national laws and regulations and federal laws and regulations that you have to adhere to. So with that being said, I'd like to jump in with a little bit of statistics first. So just to wrap your head around this, 56% of all attacks are human initiated. And what that means is a human is doing something. So a human has written a code or decided to go after somebody, or there is something that there is a person sitting behind attack. So it's a growth of an individual online transaction that typically return full digital identity data. So human-initiated attacks that basically pull your data that you're collecting from your customers. We've seen a significant uptick in that since 2020. All of these statistics are from 2022. We've seen an 82% increase in the human element, which means that stolen credentials, phishing, misuse, or simply an error are all considered, we call them human element mitigation attempts or attack vectors. What that means is 82% of all attacks that have happened to online stores have been in this sector, which is a stolen credential, phishing, misuse of a credential. So someone is using the same credential they got from somewhere else on multiple different sites, or simply a human doing something by accident and basically leading to an attacker getting access to their information. There has been a 195% uptick in automated bot attacks. Just to put that in perspective, there was about 1.4 billion attacks on e-commerce sites in 2022. Sorry. What that means is, with the addition of AI, which I will show in the next slide, the addition of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, if you've heard about that in the news, and every other version that exists. If you use Canva for creating content, Canva has their own AI. If you use Adobe Suite, Adobe now has Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator with their own AI. AI is becoming very integrated and very popular. And with that comes consequences. And now we're seeing bots that have artificial intelligence imprinted in them to do a lot of the heavy lifting that humans would have had to do much easier. So it's a little bit scary, but again, I will show you at the end of this presentation on the things that you can do to make sure that you are not the low-hanging fruit to protect yourself. And then 93% of attacks that happened in 2022 were all caused by a stolen credential. Simple as that is someone took your information. How they did it is typically through phishing, or they might have done something a little bit more malicious and they got you to do something like social engineering. They called you up and pretended to be Microsoft support or the IRS. However, either way, how they got it, the way that person ultimately compromised e-commerce platforms was the use of a stolen credential, someone's username and password, whether they guessed it, whether they socially engineered it, whether they did it through phishing. So right here is why we want to focus on passwords so increasingly much, is because the education of strong, secure passwords and the education to your employees as to why they need to protect their information is so important, to where you could possibly be in that 7% that didn't actually have their credentials stolen. So I like to show this slide because there is a software out there called Hive Systems that does a report on basically computers and how likely they are to crack a password with different variations. So as you can see, if you have a password that is only numbers and is between 4 and 10 characters, a computer, a supercomputer, not even a supercomputer, but a regular everyday household computer, could crack that type of password instantly. As you go up on the scale, if you have lowercase letters, just lowercase letters, it's anywhere between 4 to 7 is instant. If you combine both upper and lowercase letters, now you're down to it's only instant if your password's only 4 to 6 characters long. Then when you start adding numbers and then symbols, you get in that time frame where it's 4 to 5 is instant. And then as you go down the spectrum, it gets a little bit more advanced. Now, these were from 2020. And so I want you to pay attention to this section right here, which is where most of us tend to live, is we use numbers in upper and lowercase alphanumeric characters, and or we use numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols. And we typically have passwords around the 7 to 12 range. So I want you to pay attention to this as we go through the years to just highlight how supercomputers and the addition of artificial intelligence has increased this. So in 2022, they did the same report to determine passwords and the ability to crack, and things started to move down. So now something that took, let's say, 3 weeks in 2020 now takes 2 days in 2022. And it's just the advance of computers that we have and their performance and their power. Then in 2023, what used to take, what used to take 5 months now takes 2 weeks. And then we had the addition of ChatGPT, or the advanced addition of AI. So what used to take now 2 weeks now only takes an hour. And this is still in 2023. So now if you have really any password that is in the red is definitely something you want to consider changing. So this is why we recommend so much that your passwords now have to be longer than 12 characters, because it's just the way of the world that we are in now, and the fact that computers have gotten so increasingly fast and attackers have gotten faster, and now artificial intelligence can do cracking passwords much easier. So I like to just show this as a comparison where we were in 2020 versus 2023 and how exponentially we are increasing. A lot of my small businesses ask, well, if I have to have a 12-character password, how am I going to remember it if it's got to have numbers, letters, uppercase, lowercase? And I'll get into all of that at a later date, but I just like to highlight this here because it is so important that passwords are your first line of defense. And if you're using the same password or very short and very easy to guess passwords, that you are opening your e-commerce store, your website, whatever it might be, your banking information up to attackers, and they can do it within seconds. They don't need to know anything about you. All of this is done through computers. It's a system that just loads a password in and ultimately tries every combination until it guesses it. So enough about passwords. Growth in online sales. So why has the online ecosystem been growing so exponentially? One is e-commerce platforms, Shopify, BigCommerce. I've seen WooCommerce. I've seen, I'm drawing a blank on Squarespace's websites. I've seen Wix's own version. I've seen GoDaddy's. I've seen all of these different platforms that we now use for small businesses to do and get their products out to the world at a much faster rate than word of mouth or trying to advertise digitally on Facebook Marketplace or whatever it is. So the growth of the e-commerce platform has just exploded. You are able to now reach a much broader audience than you ever did before, which is fantastic. Mobile e-commerce has become a huge player in this. I actually do a whole segment just on mobile cybersecurity and how important it is to secure your mobile devices. There's a statistic that almost, I believe it's, and I don't quote me on this one because it was been a few years, I believe it was almost, it was around 55% of all sales, might be upwards of 65% now, is all done through a mobile device for online. Everyone wants to do their mobile shopping rather than web-based. And it's become even more increasing. So if you don't have a website that is mobile friendly, you kind of get left in the dust. Then social media influencers and marketers now live on the have just blown up the online space as well. You have space for digital advertising for like Google ads and social media advertising, all of these different places. Customer reviews are so integral to an online business now. You have Google reviews, you have Yelp reviews, you have all of these different variations of reviews, and there are ways to hack those as well to take down a company if they need to. So all of these different areas are what we're seeing in the online growth of online sales, and really all of them require a certain level of what we call protection in order to make sure that you are safe. And we'll go through all of the different variations here in a second. So you as business owners have a lot of different things that you have to take care of. You have a lot of different areas of expertise. You have to do your finances. You have to make sure that your bills get paid on time. You have to make sure that you're actually making the product, or you're overseeing the people that are. You have all of these different things. So you implement all of these different technological advances to streamline your business. And so that's all you're thinking is, what technology can I use to streamline my business, which is fantastic. And that's what technology is designed to do, is designed to make our lives better, except for we found that there is always a consequence to every action. Customer data to personalized experiences. You can now send emails based on the data that you get from customers. You can automate that process. You can, if a customer constantly looks at X, Y, and Z, and then purchases, I don't know, B, you have all of that data to make informed decisions on what that customer was looking for and what they ended up going with. And you can track their journeys across Facebook and Instagram and your online stores. All of these things make your life easier, make production of inventory tracking much easier. You now have an integrated point of sale system, Square, Clover, all of those different versions that make your lives easier. But the problem is now the hacker sees multiple points of entry to attack. So there's multiple routes to access personal data. They can go after your CRM. They can go after the point of sale system. They can go after your inventory tracking system. They can go after any type of integration you have to make any of your websites or anything work correctly. They can go after any of it. And because online, everything requires a username and password to do almost anything, you now have, let's say, 15, 16 different usernames and passwords, and hackers bank on the fact that you use the same 3 passwords for all 15 accounts, or you slightly modify the username and password. So you add a 1 or a 2 or a number sign or exclamation point. And what they're looking for is personally identifiable information, or SSN numbers. On the dark web, which is the web that you will never see and you'll never get access to, people are selling people's information all the time. Social security numbers are not profitable one by one. So they're never going to attack one individual. They're going to go after businesses, especially large corporations, if they can, and get loads of information at once. On the dark web, you can buy social security numbers for like 50 for $500 or something. Stealing someone's identity, there's not as much profit in it as it used to be. Unfortunately, I know that sounds very pessimistic, but really what they're looking for is to grab your data as much as possible and then hold it for ransom, because that's what we're seeing a lot more is ransomware, which we will talk about as another attack vector at a later date. Your inventory data and your product IP is very valuable to them. And your credit card information and banking information is also very valuable to them. Social security number and your identity is a little less important to them, as far as they want to get rich as quick as possible. So if they can get your credit card information, your banking information, your product's IP to sell to somebody else, or your inventory to sell to somebody else, and they can force other people to get to have traffic somewhere else, that's what they're going after. And then it's a gateway to your vendors. So you might not be the target, the overall target. Maybe, and actually I say target because Target had a data breach like this back in 2016 or 2018, 2016, I believe, where their customer data was leaked by a vendor portal that they use for an HVAC system. So they had a small business HVAC system come in and do some business for them. And in order for Target to reconcile a bunch of systems, they basically open up a system for vendors to go in and log time and update stuff and all of that. That system was compromised because an attacker stole the credentials from the small business login information and then ultimately got into Target's system that way. Now, arguably, they should have had their system separate, and Target did have a failure in that. However, it was the small business that was compromised, but it wasn't the person, that wasn't the overall, the end target. Target was the end target there. And unfortunately, the small business was just the notch in the door to get in. So now data security in a digital economy. So how do we protect ourselves with all of these different things? So if you're a small business and you are doing online sales, you typically have compliance and regulatory things that you have to comply to. One of the biggest ones is if you sell any product outside of the United States, and specifically, because it only applies to EU citizens, anywhere in the EU, the European Union, you have to adhere to the General Data Protection Regulations, also known as GDPR. It's a hot button topic a couple of years ago. You probably heard about it. Your systems that you use probably say, do you want to be GDPR compliant? There's probably a checkbox somewhere that says, do you want to be GDPR compliant? If you didn't know what that was, basically, that is the EU took data privacy very seriously. And what they did was made a federal or an overarching law that businesses had to protect the data that they collected and that they used. So GDPR is all about protection of their customers and their citizens' data. So if you do sales with anyone in the EU and are not GDPR compliant, you can run the risk of being shut down. You probably can't get to certain things. People probably can't even get to your website if you're not GDPR compliant. Also with that, you had the e-privacy directive, which is also referred to as the cookies law. If you've ever been to a site that says you need to accept these cookies or accept some of these cookies, that's that reason, is that e-privacy directive that the EU kind of pushed as well. Now everybody's kind of on that bandwagon just to be compliant across the board, but your site probably at some point, if it's not already, needs to have that, which is simply if you're on a more sophisticated site like GoDaddy, Wix, or one of these pre-built or built systems, you might have that option already integrated and it'd be easy for you to turn on and turn off. But if you don't, and you custom built your e-commerce site or you custom built your site or whatever platform you're using, you might want to talk to your developer in order to make sure that you are GDPR and or e-privacy directive compliant. You also have PCI DSS, which is payment card industry data security standard. So a lot of people call it PCI compliant. That's if you take credit cards. If you take credit cards, you need to be PCI compliant no matter what. So your system has to be PCI compliant. If you use Shopify or if you use Etsy or you use BigCommerce, they're all PCI compliant. It's usually the third parties that you're using. If you're doing any type of special integration with any system, if you're doing if you're sharing any of that data to any software that is outside of Shopify or your main data source, they also have to be PCI compliant. If you're a doctor's office and you have an online portal or you have something of that nature that people can go in and log in and see their health records, you have to be HIPAA compliant. And then you have, like I mentioned, your state and your state-specific laws. So if you have a data privacy law, then you also have to be compliant in that as well. Prevention of data breaches and cyber attacks. This is something that you as a small business have to kind of overcome and watch out for constantly. To do so, you have to make sure that you have strong passwords. You have to make sure that you are only sharing information with people that you trust. You have to make sure that you are not using third-party integration systems that are relatively weird. And what I mean by that is if you have a WordPress site and you run everything off of plugins, if you don't have a WordPress site and you don't know what plugins are, then you can zone out for a second. But if you have a WordPress site and you have plugins, not all of those plugins are trustworthy. Not all of those plugins are built and are secured to work with your system. So every time you install a plugin, you run the risk of that plugin being the vulnerable aspect of your website and also leading to the data breach and cyber attack that could potentially harm you. In order to combat that, you want to make sure that your web hosting provider or your e-commerce platform allows you some type of security monitoring, whether it be active monitoring where they send you daily reports on how many attacks have happened and how they protected you and that kind of stuff, or passive, which is more or less you set it and forget it, and you don't really, you only get notified when something actually happens versus just getting reports daily about nothing happening. Preserving customer trust. This one's really important for online businesses because you don't get to redeem yourself. If a customer is burned online and they have no brand loyalty to you, they don't see you in person, they don't know who you are as a small business, then it's very hard to get them back as a customer. So when you have a data breach, or you experience a data breach, or you believe that you have been compromised, you need to make sure that you're preserving your customers' trust. And in doing so, you want to immediately respond to the issue at hand. Whether it be the data breach, whether your employee clicked a link and they got the employee's password and username and they logged into your CRM and they took all of your information, or an employee clicked a link and now you have ransomware, which is that antivirus system that takes over your system and locks you out and tells you have to pay a ransom in order to get your data back. Whatever that data breach is, you need to immediately respond to it. You need to be transparent in your communication, tell them exactly what happened, how it happened. I'm sorry, don't tell them exactly what happened. You don't need to write a book about what happened, but you want to be transparent in your communications. Make sure that they're aware that, this happened. We understand it happened. We understand how it happened, and that we're taking all measures to prevent it. You want to apologize and take responsibility for the breach, provide support and guidance if needed, enhance your security measures, making sure that this does not happen again, and highlight to the consumer that this won't. You want to then offer compensation and remedies if that is something that you can do. And then you want to collaborate with your authorities if at all possible. The FBI has a great cybersecurity task force agency that if you experience a breach, they will help you navigate those waters. Just as some examples of some good and bad responses to a cyber data breach, Home Depot in 2014 had suffered a significant data breach where 56 million customers' emails and credit card numbers were compromised. The CEO, which actually announced its resignation after this, but took full responsibility for the action, expressed how they were going to go about it, made sure that the customers were aware of what was happening. He made sure the team would fix all issues, and was very integral in making sure that whoever was affected by the Home Depot breach was actually reassured that they are still secure. They are going to get monitoring and all of that. On the flip side, if anyone uses LastPass password management, they are being criticized right now for their poor management of their data breach. So LastPass, which is a password manager software, they had a data breach. Now, their data breach was all about I forget exactly how it happened, but basically the information that was stolen was all encrypted, or at least they told us it was all encrypted, meaning that anybody's information that was taken, nobody could actually use it because it was all randomly generated, and nobody knows how the keys to unlock to get the data that's actually in the vault that the person actually stole, the hacker stole. But what LastPass did is they kept it quiet. They didn't tell anybody about it. When it was announced that it had happened, they were very vague on the communication. They told customers not to worry about it. I personally had an issue with them as far as here at the university, our SBDC uses their vaults to secure a lot of our passwords across the organization. Problem with that was, after the breach, we asked to put them in review to make sure that their security practices are actually up to standard, and they refused to allow us to put them in review. So we pay them thousands of dollars, and yet they said that, nope, you can't come out of your contract. We didn't actually do anything wrong. So LastPass is being criticized for that. Who's to say who's right or wrong? It's just they're being criticized for that poor customer response and trust. Then lastly, we want to think about protection of your critical information. So if you use a secure e-commerce platform, you're typically good. So Shopify, BigCommerce, I'm trying to think who else. There's hundreds of them out there. Most of the good big ones are compliant with most things. You want to make sure you have an SSL certificate to help you. So implement, if you don't know what an SSL certificate is, most websites now mandate that you have one. You can't get anywhere without it. So if you bought a domain name, you probably got an SSL certificate. It makes sure that you get that little lock icon on the browser when someone's browsing your website. It basically gives you that little S that happens after HTTP. So it's usually HTTPS is what an SSL certificate does. You want to make sure you have a strong password policy and regularly update your software. Your software meaning any plugins you might have on your website. If you're using any type of third-party integration into a Shopify, into a BigCommerce, into WooCommerce, that you update those external processes as well. Secure payment processing. Don't use, I know small businesses, you want to save on every processing fee that you possibly can, but don't risk using a random third-party processing payment portal because they claim that they can save you 1 or 2% on transactions. I know it sounds like a lot of money you'd be saving, but depending on how they're built and how well they're encrypted, you might be spending thousands of dollars later because you used a payment portal that wasn't very good. PayPal, Shopify, Amazon Pay, all of these big payment portals all have to be compliant and are all relatively secure. So just make sure you're using Stripe is another one I always forget to mention. Just make sure you're using a payment portal that is good. We see this a lot more on WordPress sites when you can have a lot of these customized integrations. And yes, your websites, your WordPress sites, your e-commerce sites, wherever you are, you probably should have some type of antivirus software on the computer systems that are being used to access these systems, as well as making sure you have some type of antivirus monitoring system on the actual software or website itself. So like we use SiteGround for our site hosting, and they have an antivirus package that you can have where they just scan our site for any malicious code. Every site has that, and I highly recommend that you probably get something like that. It's an added fee for maybe it's $2, $3 a month, but it's a peace of mind for you as an e-commerce site. So what are the common threats that we see to small businesses in this realm? Data breaches, which is kind of happens because of everything else to its right now. But data breaches are whenever you lose customer information. It is unauthorized access to your customer information that is considered a data breach. So technically, if you have an employee that leaves the company but still has access to your systems and you never kind of taken them out of your system, that technically would, draw a gray line between data breach, because now it's somebody who should not have access to your data that does. I see a lot of this with, I used to be a digital forensics investigator in New York, and I saw a lot of this with higher up organizations where the CEOs, the CTOs, they want the latest and greatest iPad, iPhone, whatever it might be. And so what they do is they set all of this stuff up, and then a year later, the new one comes out, they want that one. Rather than trading in their old one or giving it to IT staff to wipe and get rid of, they just keep piling these phones and iPads and computers up on their home network or whatever it is. And I had a client who ultimately was hacked because he left an iPad that was 3 or 4 years old on his home network. He never touched it, but he left it plugged in and left it up to date, or left it on all the time connecting to the internet. And it just increasingly got out of date because he didn't update the software. He didn't update the apps. He didn't update any of the systems that were on the actual iPad. So just make sure that if you're using any system, any computer, laptop, tablet, whatever it is, to access any of your business content, especially your financial information, that you are securing them somehow, some shape, and you know that they exist in order to prevent data breaches. Phishing attacks, I mentioned this in the beginning of the presentation, are among one of the largest reasons why people get hacked. It is basically, a phishing attack is when you get sent a malicious email that either has an attachment that they want you to download and open, it has a link they want you to click on, and it can be as simple as clicking on the link, or it can be where you actually have to click the link and then put in your information. Phishing is, they can be as bad as and easily spotted as a Nigerian prince wants to send you $1 million, but they need your banking information first, to pretty sophisticated ones that I do a phishing education training here through my department, and I almost slipped up on one that I designed myself, mainly because it looked exactly how I wanted it to look. It looked like it came from a legitimate source. It looked like it was a Bank of America, because we use Bank of America as our university's corporate sponsor. And it looked like it came from an official Bank of America letterhead. It looked like it came from higher up. It had Bank of America information in it. The link took them to what looked like an exact replica of the Bank of America website, but emphasis on exact replica, because it wasn't Bank of America's website. Attackers do this. They will design a login page that looks identical to your your financial institution's websites, and that's all they'll do, is just that page, just enough to where it looks legitimate, where you'll enter in your information, and then boom, you'll just not log in, because it'll just sit there loading at that page, but they've already stolen your information and gotten away with it. So phishing attacks, very, very crucial to avoid, and the only way to avoid them is employee training. You can do this. There's a lot of free software out there to train yourself on how to spot phishing attempts. There is KnowBe4. Google has their own version that is free for if you want to learn. So we have more resources that if you ever feel that you want to test your knowledge on phishing, we can definitely help you out on finding some resources to do so. Malware and ransomware. Ransomware, I already kind of alluded to. It's when an attacker basically downloads the malicious content onto the system and then locks your system up. And the only way to get any of your data back is to give them a password or pay them money in order for them to unlock your data. Two things on ransomware. We tend to tell people to not pay the ransom, because you're just signaling to the person who you paid the ransom to that you have no backups, and that you would be more willing to pay for the data than you are to kind of go back to the day before or whatever on a backup to restore information, rather than just pay the ransom. And the other reason why we tell people not to pay the ransom is there's honor among thieves. So let's say I'm an attacker. I stole your information today. I got you to pay the ransom. I'll go tell my buddy who's an attacker, who is in a completely different organization of attackers, that, hey, this one over here, this is how I got in. They haven't probably fixed it yet. And if you want to get paid real quick, you might want to do the same thing. Now, so that way they didn't go and attack you again, but somebody else did. And then malware is all the other kind of viruses that you get, the pop-ups, the ads, your computer start to be slow, keyloggers, which is things that you don't even know are on your computer, but every time you type on a keyboard, it records everything you type, and eventually it will guess your password. There are all different versions of malware. The only way to protect against them is antivirus and anti-malware. Insider threats. This was one of the common things that I actually worked on as an investigator. Was anytime an employee that left the organization or is still in the organization, but we see a lot of data leaving, personal emails, that kind of stuff. So I know as a small business, we're pretty small organizations usually. We trust all of our employees, but at the end of the day, the human element is our weakest link, and money changes people. So if they feel that they can take a little bit of money without you knowing, and they feel that it's justified, they will do it. We see this a lot with bookkeepers. A lot of my small businesses will hire a bookkeeper or an accountant, give them access to all of their information, their books, whatever, and then never look at it. Problem is, they're probably going to eventually realize that it's pretty easy to pay themselves an extra $200, $300, and you'll never know. You'll never notice that amount, and you'll never look for it. One business I was working with, he had over $10,000 to $15,000 stolen this way over a 2-year period because of it. And then social engineering. Social engineering is when you get those phone calls, and you get those mainly phone calls that you get from a Microsoft account representative saying that, oh, your computer has a virus, you should log in and let us take care of it. Or the IRS calling you and saying, hey, you haven't paid your taxes, you need to go in and pay your taxes. Let me be brutally clear here. Microsoft One is never as proactive as that. So they will never identify something wrong with your computer before you tell them something is wrong with your computer. So if you think that that's weird, that someone just randomly reached out and you think that your computer is fine and you didn't even tell Microsoft about it, probably fake. Also, IRS will never call you. IRS much prefers snail mail. They will do everything via the mail. So if you get a phone call, text message, whatever it is from the IRS, probably not them, actually 99% not them. And you can always verify by going to the IRS's website directly, not the website that you might get in the email or whatever, where it says, click this link to go to the site to make sure that it's legit. Don't do any of that. Go to the website that you have for the IRS, which is irs.gov. And you log in the way that you know how to log in, or you go to Microsoft.com and you log in the way that you know how to log in. Don't ever use the links that are provided to you via emails if you're questioning their legitimacy. So, consequences of inadequate security. Damage to reputation. So if you don't protect your customer's data, you're going to lose the customer. You are going to lose their trust. You are going to lose business. You are going to lose, probably, it depends on who your customer is. If it's B2B, you're probably never going to get a contract with a Target, a Home Depot, any of these large vendors again without seriously redoing your security policies. If it's B2C, you're probably not going to get the same customer back, especially in this day and age of influencer marketing and that everyone has a voice online. If you burn a customer that bad, that can spread like wildfire on TikTok, Instagram, you name it, that platform. And if with private policy, with personal identity protection being so in the air right now, and everyone is, everyone is 100% identity protection right now. So if you are doing something that goes against that, you will probably be harmed and lose customer trust. Legal and regulatory issues. You can get fined a lot for not being PCI compliant, not being GDPR compliant, and ultimately those fines can put you out of business. If not, the ransomware that you have to pay, or the fees that you have to pay a digital forensics investigator like myself to come in and investigate why you were breached and how you were breached, are going to be detrimental to you as well. We're talking thousands of dollars to remediate a data breach if one is to happen. So some strategies for risk mitigation: implement secure payment gateways. Make sure that you're using these Stripe, Squares, PayPals. Don't use a random one to save a few bucks. Trust me, it's not worth it. Utilize encryption and SSL certificates. So if you're storing any files in the cloud or anything like that, make sure it's encrypted. Make sure your devices that you are using to interact with the online systems, your online stores, are encrypted. iPhones by default are encrypted. Androids, you used to have to turn them on, but they might be encrypted now by default as well. If you have a Windows machine, you have BitLocker that you can turn on, which is a whole disk encryption. If you have if you have Mac, you have File Vault that you can turn on, which is also a file level encryption. All of them are free. Then your SSL certificate, that's that thing that we talked about where it turns your HTTP into HTTPS and gives you a nice secure website. Make sure you're regularly updating your software and your systems. So any system, any software that interacts with any online system needs to be updated. If it touches the internet and it is out of date, trust me, there is a vulnerability for it. Someone has already identified it, and that's why we update. Conduct employee training and security best practices. You need to train your employees. That's why I highlight the human element all the way in the beginning, that if you train your employees enough, they'll learn what to do and what not to do, and hopefully that'll protect you. Implement access controls and user authentication. Two-factor authentication. Make sure that you have that on at least bare minimum, any financial website. So if you've got Bank of America, you've got PNC, you've got your common community banks or local community banks, have two-factor turned on at least. That's that code that you can get sent to your text message, or you have an authenticator app like a Google Authenticator or a Microsoft Authenticator with a 6-digit reoccurring code. You need to do that on every site possible. Trust me, because if they somehow get your username and password, at least they can't get your code. And then implement access controls. Not everybody needs access to everything. So I know as a small business, it's very easy to, you want to go with the cheapest route. So you get a CRM that you buy at the lowest tier. It gives you one username and password. So you give that out to everyone who needs access to the CRM, and everybody's sharing the same thing. It kind of ruins access control because now you never know who logged in to do what, because 5 or 6 people have the same information. So what I recommend for small businesses who need to do this in order to save money, which I understand, I'm a small business myself, get a password manager. The password manager will at least let you control access to that shared username and password. So if you have a CRM that has one username and password, get everyone in your team a password manager and then share that password within the password manager to everyone in your team. Then they can log in whenever they want, and it's fine, but then you can revoke access as well. And then back up your systems to the cloud or offsite location. So if you have Shopify or an online e-commerce store that has all your inventory in it, they're regularly backing up. Hopefully, if not, there's add-ons that allow you to back up your stuff as well. It's always a good idea to back up all of your data on an offsite location. An offsite location would mean one that is not located in your office or located online. So offsite locations is back up your data, back up your computer to an external hard drive, and then put it, I don't know, in somewhere else outside of your office. Because if you have a fire and your computer that is in your office is destroyed, at least you have that backup that's located somewhere else or in the cloud. You never want backups to be stored in the same place because natural disasters happen. So establishing a secure e-commerce strategy, make sure you conduct a thorough risk assessment that is going through all of your systems, making sure that you have everything that you need in order to create a thorough assessment of what you're doing and what systems are at risk. Develop a comprehensive security policy. This is very crucial for anyone who has employees. If you allow them to connect to any Wi-Fi that you offer, if you allow them to use their personal devices to access business information, if you allow them to do anything that touches your business network, your business systems, there needs to be a policy in place on who is responsible during a data breach and why, and what happens in the event that an attacker kind of leapfrogged from, I don't know, Susie, who's your part-time intern who joined your network and then leapfrogged into your business network. So some type of policy. There's many out there. Earl and I can recommend a templated version, but we do recommend that it get looked at by an attorney in order to shore up any loose ends. Choose reputable e-commerce platforms and service providers. Don't go with random ones that you never heard of because they're claiming that they're going to be cheaper. The bigger they are, yes, the more expensive they typically are, but in the same sense, they have to protect themselves in order to save themselves from reputation. So they're going to be more secure. Regulatory monitor security logs and alerts. So I'm not saying you need to be a cyber nerd like myself or Earl, and you need to go through all of the different logs of this IP address did this, and you probably don't even know what IP addresses are, and I completely understand that. What you need to do, though, is at least set up a security measure on your website, GoDaddy, Wix, SiteGround, whoever you have your platform through, to where you can at least get emails when I don't know, someone from China logs into your systems, or someone from Russia logs into your systems, because then you can at least know that somebody has compromised a password and they came from outside the United States and none of us were in those countries. So you can at least protect yourselves that way. And then stay up and informed of the news articles that exist today. Technology is ever changing. Who would have thought that AI would have rapidly changed 2023 for us? It did, and it is ever increasing. Every software that we use online today has some form of AI integration, and that was the hot button. Who knows what it's going to be in the future, but make sure that you are at least learning and staying up to some threats that affect online systems. So I like to close out with a little bit of just what happened with data breaches in the news. Shopify had a data breach back in, actually I don't have the date on that one, but Shopify did have a data breach. All of these big guys do. Shopify became aware of the incident that 200 merchants on Shopify platform were leaked by a rogue member of their support team. And this is why insider threat is so important, because the individual didn't feel that they were compensated enough or that they were terminated correctly. So they felt that they were going to take Shopify down and steal a bunch of information and put everybody at risk. So this was what we would consider insider threat. WooCommerce had vulnerabilities as well. So if you don't know what WooCommerce is, it's WordPress's version of a online sales platform. They had basically attackers could obtain store-related information and administrative details through their plugin. So that was caused by people not updating their information, or updating their plugin. So making sure that you keep your WordPress sites updated can prevent a lot of that as well. So these big guys aren't vulnerable, they're just as vulnerable, but I highlight the big guys because small businesses go out of business when they have a data breach. They don't get news coverage because they're so small and so minimal that we have hundreds of businesses that go out of business from data breaches all of the time, but you'll never know because no news article is going to cover it. So the best that we can do for this is make sure that you understand that what's happening in the real world to these big companies can be translated to you as well, and that you need to at least protect yourself like they have to protect themselves. And so key takeaways. Some form of security should be monitoring on your site. So you need to have some type of security monitor. You need to use unique usernames and passwords. Employee should have their own account. If they can't, use a password manager and implement two-factor authentication regardless of where you are. It doesn't have, I don't care if it is the code or the text message, or it is biometrics, or it is whatever authentication that is an addition to the password. Backups and updates should be run regularly. So backing up your website, backing up your the data that is on your e-commerce platform, making sure that you're updating all of your plugins. And you need to have your website's encryption should be turned on. Your SSL should be there. If you want to be ranked highly in Google review or Google ranks and Bing ranks, you need to have an encryption. At this point, if you're a website that doesn't have SSL encryption, you're getting knocked to the very last page of Google. So that is e-commerce and data protection from me. Again, I'm Jake Blackson. I'm Digital Solutions Manager at Delaware SBDC. I do see that there are some questions in the chat. I think Earl has been doing a lot of that for me, but if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask in person or via the chat now, feel free. But thank you all for joining. I know cybersecurity isn't the most sexiest of topics for a small business, and we completely understand that, but it is just as important as everything else. Oh, boy. Welcome, guys. Thank you very much for joining. Earl, were you able to answer all of their questions in the chat?
Yeah, I think I got each one of them that came through. Certainly, if I missed the mark on any, please do chime in and ask again. But yeah, so we had some good questions.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. And again, if you have any questions or want resources or anything like that, you can always go to americassbdc.org/cybersecurity, where we have resources available for you as a small business. You can also email Earl and I at cybersecurity at americassbdc.org as well. All of that is available to you if you have any questions as a small business. So
thank you once again for a really informative workshop. You guys give great information. I learned so much every time I listen to you. I will be sure to send out a follow-up email to everyone who registered. It'll include a recording of today's webinar and the link, the America's SBDC link that you suggested, as well as your email for follow-up questions. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for joining us.